that one finished.
I will, otherwise I'll be in a heap of trouble.
Okay, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Scrutiny Improvement Committee meeting of 2nd of April. First on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting of the 5th of February. Is it everyone's wish that I sign the minutes as an accurate record? Apologies for absence, we just have one councillor in Robertson. Declarations of members' interests. Does anyone have any interest to declare? Item 4. So welcome to Councillor Auger and Maria Taylor. Thank you very much for coming along and to tell us a little bit about the current situation relating to housing and homelessness in the district.
Okay, are you ready?
Far away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful for Maria being here, and I think as an administration, some of the best work we can do is actually providing that shelter for those that need it within our districts. We are obviously and evidently are not building enough homes throughout the country, but where we take it very seriously is to ensure those people that find themselves in crisis, and anyone can end up in a homeless situation, have the right sort of support and organisation to go to try and relieve those difficulties. And they are complex and difficult, and this is a difficult area of business, and there are no clear answers, but hopefully we'll give you an overview of roughly how this district council are doing this work and being compliant with government directions and government legislation in trying to ease the burden on some of our most vulnerable people. We're also going to touch on the areas of care and repair. It's not just about housing waiting lists and homelessness and grants. It's about care and repair, which supports clients in accessing grant funding to ensure their current homes meets their needs. It also touches on environmental protection, and that deals with housing stock condition, housing in multi-occupation and legislation. And also there are links to other frontline services which provide us challenges and opportunities where we've got to work with partner agencies. You know, some of the cases we deal with in homelessness are not just simply someone without a home. Invariably they are connected to other issues that individual and that client may have. So we're going to talk about working with partners such as the police, social services, housing associations, health and other agencies. We're going to talk about the role of self-service. You know, self-reliance is really important. It's important that the residents that do have need find ways of accessing systems themselves to help them in their searches for homes. And also we're going to talk about the handling of neighbourhood nuisance alongside other teams and the use of new legislation. Okay, housing option teams. Housing option teams are multi-skilled officers. Originally, before 2000 and April 2018, we had 7. There's been an increase of 9, and they offer advice and assistance to all housing options available to those in housing need, including helping those to remain in their home longer by using aids and adaptations. And this invariably involves multi-agency work, including case conferences, visiting hospital teams, working with other councils, safeguarding domestic violence cases, housing offenders or victims, and providing sanctuary schemes to keep victims in their own home.
Sorry, but just ask a question at this point. You talk about modifications to people's homes to allow them to continue living there. Where do we draw the line? I assume we mean elderly people, disabled people.
Not necessarily. We're going to come on to those grant schemes. There are a number of grants. There are people that are elderly and require stuff for disability, but there are also another scheme that we have which then allows them. It may well be somebody that is, that have bought their own council house years ago. They may be a widower and they don't have a massive income, we do provide grants to allow them to remain in that home, repairing the windows, for instance. But obviously there's a charge put onto their houses, means tested, etc. But we'll come on to that at a later stage.
May I just ask the distinction between what we do in that respect and the work of Northamptonshire County Council and the adult social care side of things, because they do similar work.
Well, the statutory duty for disabled facilities grants is on the local housing authority, so we do not do anything that the county council do. County council deal with care plans and portable equipment, but changes to homes under the disabled facilities grant, which is statutory legislation, we don't go beyond that. So the maximum is £30,000. It's means tested for all adults. So you make a contribution if you earn above the threshold, but for children's grants it isn't, and that is anybody with a long-term illness or disability that might need adaptations.
Thank you.
We will come across that again, so I'll try to erase the information that Maria's already given you. But yeah, okay, homelessness. As expected, the changes that came in April of 2018 have had a huge impact on the housing options. And implementation has gone well, largely, and we now mostly have this new team of sort of 9 caseworkers, along with a team leader and a manager and some other support, gives a maximum team of 13, and this is a rise of 7. Before April 2018, the demand on housing options was 200 homeless approaches each year, main homelessness duty to about 100 applicants, a maximum of 9 in temporary accommodation at any one time, and of course we do have our own properties and bed and breakfast, which isn't ideal, but it is a short-term fix to keep people with a roof over their head. But between April 2018 and December 2018, so since the new legislation came in, we've had 416 homeless approaches, and that's up from 200 a year, and this is just in the quarter 3. 26
So that's the first 9 months up to the end.
First 9 months.
Yeah.
First 9 months. 26 prevention cases, 50 relief cases, which cases that have gone to resolution, 38 main duty cases, and 32 in temporary accommodation. And at the moment, 8 are in flats or houses and 24 in bed and breakfast. We've definitely seen a 5-fold increase in demand, and that was predicted. Cases also take much longer than before. There are 56 days prevention, 56 days relief, and an indefinite amount of time in main duty. And main duty is actually taking them to resolution, to actually taking them into a place where they finally have a home.
Can I just ask about your, as predicted, a 5-fold increase? Where does that prediction come from?
There was I'll let
That's what when we went for the training before the implementation of the legislation. Based on the Welsh model, they experienced a 5-fold increase in demand. So
that is
not just number of cases, but the amount of time each case.
So is that because of the new Act?
Yes.
Right, okay, sorry.
Yeah, we used to have a very narrow duty,
Right.
and now the duty is much wider,
It's the
much
expansion
longer.
of the Act that has created the extra demand. So, for all intents and purposes, that latent demand was already there. It's just that the Act has actually opened it up to this council.
The rough sleeping statistics are quite interesting. There is a difference between homelessness and rough sleeping, and sometimes I think we tend to get the two mixed up. Homelessness in our districts in 2018, last time we did our survey, was 3. Obviously, when we go to a unitary, and for a comparison, South Northants was 0, and the borough 26. So we can see that although there is a rough sleeping issue here, it is very low compared to the amount of people that have homeless issues or are declared as homeless.
Sorry, Richard.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joe.
That's okay.
Just on, I might go around the other side. Just on, sorry, did you say 3 people were rough sleeping in the district?
Yeah, on the rough sleep account night.
So that's that one night where
that's the national measure.
Okay, and the 20 sorry, you were saying 26 in the...
Borough.
In the...
Yeah, on that night, yeah.
So when we say the borough?
Northampton.
Northampton borough, only 26.
And that would be rough sleepers as opposed to people in a night shelter. So it's just people who would sleep on a bench, in the street.
Or in a tent.
It's like 3 in the morning, in a car, whatever.
And, sorry, Councillor Ritchie, did you want to...
That's just answered my question, because
Part of my voluntary work is I work at the night shelter in Northampton, and that is it's a well-run facility. But the issues are, with regard to that facility, is that they don't just turn up. It's not like the old days where people just turn up. So the people that work with that facility bring in, I don't know, sometimes we're told they're going to be about, 20 odd or whatever it can take, and only about 10 turn up. So the problem is acute there. But again, the problems are really, really, really difficult. And I just thought this was quite a good anecdotal case, is that one evening I was there and there was a gentleman there, and he had very difficult, he was an alcoholic, mental health issues, very, very difficult. The voluntary and statutory agencies worked with this fella, and on that night, this was the Saturday night, on the Monday he was being put into a residential place to get some help for his addiction. It was quite exciting, everyone was excited for him. We were all excited the fact that he was getting the help he needed, because that was the cause of his homelessness. And the next time I arrived, I inquired after him and said, how's he doing in rehab and all the rest of it. And he went AWOL on the Sunday, and he ended up down in Brighton. And he just didn't have that inward will, that power to go through with it. And despite what the local support was for him, to get him this really precious place on this in this rehab unit, that in himself he couldn't do it. So some of these problems are really difficult, and I think we will always struggle with that and even if we get everything joined up, we will still have those issues with rough sleeping, which is sad, but an indictment upon.
May I just ask, we have a rough sleeping count of 3. Obviously we're in quite a large rural district, so I know within my ward of Weedon we have had in the past rough sleepers and canal bridges and what have you. So how are we able to satisfy ourselves that the methodology and the count is correct, given the challenges of doing something like that in a district such as ours?
For the night of the count, there was, in the lead up to that, we contacted all sorts of community groups, agencies, parish councils, and sought information. But when for rough sleepers generally, any reports we get, outreach workers go out and find them. And occasionally you get rough sleepers who don't have any apparent mental health, substance abuse issues, but it's their choice. They've chosen, and we've gone out on a freezing cold night and walked half a mile along the canal and found the guy who's filthy dirty, but quite happy. I know where A&E is. I'm quite happy to be here. No, thank you. I don't want to go to a hotel. And that's But for the actual rough sleep account, there's a specific methodology that we all follow. So you go out of your way to find who was out and where on that night.
And I think those are, certainly anecdotally, from the times when Maria and I have our monthly meeting, when they do have any pieces of intelligence and information about somebody within our district, I think even Maria herself has been out, they go out and they try to seek and find these individuals to provide that help and support. I think when Unitary comes, then hopefully we'll tie into some of the work that's done in Northampton and may have a more sophisticated process and system that will be then Unitary-wide. But at the moment, I'm really pleased with the way that we take those reports and act upon them. Temporary accommodation, temporary accommodation is used to be provided if an applicant was eligible, used to be provided if an applicant was eligible, homeless and in priority need, and had no accommodation available or nowhere to stay pending inquiries into a homeless application. Now it's provided to any homeless applicant. Temporary accommodation can be bed and breakfast accommodation, hotel or guest house, or in our own stock of homes. We've got a number of premises that we have available to us for this purpose. They can be anywhere that is available, sometimes out of area. Applicants will be expected to pay towards this accommodation or apply for housing benefit towards the cost. Income and expenditure will be calculated to confirm amount to be paid. Currently, we have 3 Daventry District Council 2-bed properties, 1 2-bed private sector lease property, 2 2-bed social rental properties, and 2 1-bed flats. Short-term only, as the building is pending renovation. Bed and breakfast is unsettling for clients. It is not the ideal option. Also increasingly difficult to secure hotel provision within the area, close to support networks and schools and employment, as well as costly to the council. So what is the answer? We do have a demand for this emergency and temporary accommodation. So the demand is a flexible hostel. Now, we have had many discussions about the feasibility of this, and I think there is a will to progress this. But at the moment, it would take 18 to 24 months to provide this hostel accommodation on current estimates. And there are challenges finding housing association partners to manage it. I don't think this would be something that the district would do anyway, to get somebody professionally who could manage the facility for us. And finding and adapting a building suitable and not in a sensitive location, etc., etc. Now, we would not be able to deliver this before Unitary, and so therefore at the moment it is thought that it is probably something for the shadow body that will come into force in 12 months' time to begin to look at. And we were discussing this earlier on about, even if we were to pursue and begin the groundwork of finding this hostel, because I think there is a really good answer to an intractable problem of not having to use bed and breakfast. Where would we locate it? Or where would we locate it if it's Daventry District? Or where do we locate it if it's Unitary? And they could be 2 completely different places depending on where the Unitary felt it would be most use and impact on most people. So that certainly isn't off the table, but it certainly isn't something that we will probably do in our lifetime, because we simply haven't got the time to do it. And I personally, politically, wouldn't want to start a project that actually couldn't be fulfilled and may well compromise what harmonisation has to be done when the new Unitary comes into force.
Councillor Wesley first and Councillor Ritchie.
If just sort of check on sort of beginning there. If somebody presents as homeless, are we saying that we actually regard them as homeless? Is that the nub of what?
Yeah, if somebody demonstrates that they haven't got anywhere to stay, then we have to provide them with bed and breakfast.
Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
I'm just a little surprised. Reorganisation, we don't know when it is going to happen, if it is going to happen. But we've known about this uncertainty and likelihood a long time. Are our teams not working closely with county teams and with Northampton borough teams on all these issues at the moment? I would have thought that even if we weren't considering reorganisation, that there would still be a case for having some sort of joined up approach, given the bigger needs that Northampton Town is going to have, and the fact that if we end up with a hostel in Northampton, but nothing at all in Daventry, well, maybe you just get more people who want to sleep under canal bridges than all the way to Northampton. It just strikes me that the idea of just saying, well, look, there's nothing we can do about it at the moment, or we can't even think about it. We just put this on hold for what could be. It could be another full year before we actually have reorganisation. By the time that the reorganisation takes place, it could be another year before people get around to thinking about this level of detail, this level of programme.
I'll leave Maria to do the operational side, and then I'll give you my political view on that.
A hostel, to have a critical mass, would need to be a certain size. It's certainly, if we were to create a hostel to meet Daventry District needs, 60 to 80 places, say, £5-6 million, then you could make an argument for that to be a payback, and I would have already done that by now. But with a big factor is that we actually don't know what the when it settles down, which is what it's predicted to do, I don't know what the underlying demand is going to be. So it's difficult for me to make that case to say to Daventry District Council, invest this, but take a leap of faith, because we'll probably still have enough demand, and the world is changing. I mean, you can't really build a cost-effective hostel, flexible hostel type accommodation that might provide. I mean, that might meet a range of your needs for your most vulnerable, homeless, and related clients. But we need to understand what social services would want from that. I mean, we do have meetings to discuss this, and this has been on the agenda at chief housing officers, and it's been raised through the health networks as well. But there are so many shifting circumstances at the moment that I'm not in a position where I can put a case forward. If we could, then you could make a case and speak to South Northampton, Northampton, and say, let's jointly put the capital in to provide X. But we've not been able to get to that position because we've all recognised that demand has come out in different ways in the different areas, and because Homeless Reduction Act is so new. I mean, you think it's if I settle back down to the previous levels, there is no case, because I'm going to be spending less than £100,000 a year on bed and breakfast compared to the current spend, which was most of the homeless budget last year of over 400,000. So that's my difficulty. I've got to make a case that will stand up to scrutiny, that it's too risky to make that leap, because there's so many factors pulling in different directions.
Back then, I can understand that. You don't build a hostel for 3 people. I'm not convinced at all, though, that 3 represents the demand. I know of flats, of houses in Daventry that have got a lot more than 3 people staying in them. People who are simply there, they will spend a few nights there, they'll move on for a few nights somewhere else, and they will move around. I can tell you a particular garage, I haven't been to it at night, but I'm told that it used to accommodate anything between 20 and 30 people.
A garage?
A garage.
When you say a garage, you mean?
I don't mean that sort of filling station.
You mean?
I mean premises which are dry, that people can go to.
If that's happening, then we will go and find, and we will go out and do outreach, because that is not a story I've heard before.
But you know that
and anyone who's house sharing,
who the last thing that they want to do is have a visit from a council officer. There are people who are surface surfing. In the case of those who are in flats, a fairly high proportion have got mental health problems, but fairly mild ones. I mean, they're sort of functioning adults.
When you say they're in flats, Councillor Richie, do you mean they're sofa surfing in somebody else's flat?
In somebody else's flat,
yeah.
Where somebody has got perhaps a 1-bedroom flat or a 2-bedroom flat, and there are a whole host.
They're letting their friends stay because they've got no. I mean, it's anyone with no secure tenure can come and get advice, and will be dealt with through the Homeless Reduction Act. It covers all of those people. It's not just about people being in the highest level of priority need like it used to be.
But how do you get that?
Encourage people
the flats I'm talking about, I encountered, and I actually worked with the people a few years ago. They're not actually in my ward, but it's somebody else's ward. I suspect there was some in my ward too. And of course, the thing that they did not want immediately to find themselves that they regard as a problem.
But that's not how it works.
The guys who held the tenancies were aware that they were breaking all the rules of tenancies.
And we can take action with partners, and we can put roofs over those people's heads. If any councillor or any citizen is coming across issues like that, they really need to be reported. We will work with agencies. The new Homeless Reduction Act is such that we wouldn't just go along and cause somebody a problem. We'd be offering them a roof over their head that night. That's how it works.
I think,
maybe they
if I
want
can
to know
interject,
about it.
sorry, Councillor Litchi, we were talking about a specific case
Yeah.
here. I think this needs to be looked at in detail offline.
We're not talking about a specific case. We're talking about a whole category of cases. And it's not just a Daventry problem, it is a Daventry problem across the whole country. Many people who are homeless do not want to be put into accommodation of the sort that we offer. It's how we actually approach these people. And it is a much wider problem. And we can't simply boil it down to, here are the statistics of the numbers that we've collected in one night.
Can I just give the political...
Sorry, Richard, Mark.
Yeah, it's I would say it's along the same lines, but I was just a little bit intrigued on the numbers about whether we should, about the action that's taken. At the beginning, we heard that it was predicted that there was going to be a 5-fold increase in demand. Why would that dissipate as the act comes into
Because you're able to do more prevention and relief work. So actually you get this peak at the beginning because as people begin to understand. So for a year or two, perhaps you get a rising in demand, and then it settles down because people realise earlier on that they can come and sign up for help.
So have we seen evidence of that?
Not yet, because we're just a year. We're a year this week. So it's we don't know if it's going to rise a bit more before it levels off, but that was the experience in Wales.
I just think on the political side, I have great sympathy with your observations and your comments. I do think Maria Taylor is right, is that if we have a responsibility to report these things. We cannot have...
Safeguarding.
Yeah, just with regard to... But I do understand that maybe that's the last thing that they want. But this truly is multi-agency work, which goes on to my political point with regard to, is it right to build the hostel now, or is it right to try to, when we have the unitary, to try to harmonise what is going on in the borough, in South Northampton and in Daventry, but more importantly, with regard to the night shelter, there's got to be a better way of doing it. I work in the night shelter, and I see the good it does for those people that are there. But there are professional people that do. We talk to the manager there that have views and opinions, whereby we come up with a more sophisticated way of trying to deal with these hard to reach groups. What is the best way of trying to keep people safe and secure? So I think personally, I am impatient for it. I would prefer, and Maria knows that we've talked about, we even talked to one of the RPs about providing the service for us, running it for us. But this probably isn't the time yet. We just need to probably get out all the ducks in a row and try and get something that's going to be longer lasting and a little bit more sophisticated, which we'll talk about, to reach the hard to reach groups. Housing register, where are we now? Number 5. Okay. Home choice is the way that we let our houses, and we had 350 lettings each year, and this is the way that the council discharge their duties and its statutory homeless and housing duties. So the legislation has a requirement that Daventry District Council's allocation scheme determines priorities and procedures to be followed in allocating accommodation whilst giving reasonable preference. And I'll talk about what reasonable preference is. It's a terminology from the Act. Daventry District Council operates a common house register on behalf of the registered providers, so on behalf of the housing associations, working within the district. This means that applicants only need to complete one application, which will be assessed under the set of criteria to be considered for housing in the district. This ensures that all participants are treated in a fair, even and transparent manner. And I'm sure we have all had cases where we have lobbied Maria, and the reply is always they'll go into the system, they'll be treated like everybody else will be treated in a fair and transparent way, measured against the criteria. So anyone aged 16 or over can apply to join the Home Choice Register for accommodation subject to them being eligible, and the eligibility assessment includes income and savings, rent arrears, house-related debt, antisocial behaviour, so incidents, and a local connection to Daventry if necessary. And these are assessed against the reasonable preferences, which I'll come up to in a minute, which is defined by the Housing Act 1996 as amended by the Localism Act 2011. Now you'll see the bands there. We did some. We had a look at some of the data now. Now each applicant is put into a band, which means with regard to their priority when it comes down to getting housing. We have an emergency band, and at the moment we have 26 souls on that emergency band. In Band A we currently have 170, Band B 227, Band C 224, and Band D 244. So there's some sort of similar numbers there, and 891 overall are active on our list. But this is a movable feast. Like tomorrow, those numbers could be completely different. Yeah.
Just on the numbers, is that individuals, so that would include members of a family?
Yeah, applications includes individual, couple, household.
So is it the numbers of people?
Number of applicants, yeah. So no, not the number of people. An application could be 1, 2
So it's
plus.
800 or 900 applicants, but that could be 2,000 people.
I suppose if they're big families.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it wouldn't be as many as that. I think it would probably only be twice.
Sorry, it's just
as many, yeah.
So that's where we currently stand with regard to our bands and the current needs that are out there. But as I said, it is a movable feast, and it depends on a day-by-day basis how many that we're actually carrying forward. Okay, reasonable preference. Try and get one more things right. Okay, there are five pieces to this criteria. So reasonable preference is people who are homeless, people who are owed a duty by the local authority, people occupying unsanitary or overcrowded housing, which would probably go along with some of your cases, otherwise living in unsatisfactory housing conditions, people who need to move on medical or welfare grounds, including grounds relating to disability, and people who need to move to a particular locality in the district of the authority where failure to meet the need would cause hardship to themselves or others. When we discussed this at our pre-meet, you shared some interesting about this isn't, in all cases, this isn't held, you're talking about the difference. Can you share that with them? I thought that was quite interesting.
Our eligibility criteria in accordance with the council's allocation scheme is that as long as you've got connection to the district, you can go on the housing waiting list. And if you've got no other priority, you're Band D. Now, whilst Northampton Borough operates, we started out with the same policy. Now, you have to have one or more reasonable preference criteria to get onto Northampton Borough's council housing list. And if you look on their choice-based lettings, you'll see that they only house emergency and Band A. So that was in order to manage the scale of their problem, because the amount of demand they've got and the amount of supply are so stretched that they don't allow people with a lower preference on the housing waiting list.
And if you think about when we go to unitary, who's going to inherit that? And I asked the question naively, well, what happens to everybody else? They got to fend for themselves?
Yeah, well, we need to. It's going to be quite a job for housing policy people to make recommend what options are available for there to be one housing allocation scheme across the whole of West Northamptonshire, because you're dealing with very different issues in very different locations with very different demands.
One of the advantages of Daventry, we roughly know, I know this isn't with regard to the applications, you're right about the exact number, it's a lot more than 891, but we roughly know the applications that are coming in. Currently in Northampton, they don't even know how many people they have out there. They only put people in Band A, so the Band B, C and D, which here is what, over 700 people, don't even appear on the list.
Is that not? Doesn't that fall outside the statutory instrument?
No. That's how they've agreed that they're going to write their allocations.
So whoever picks up this portfolio in the unitary, in the shadow, has got some serious work to do, because that can't be right, can it? It can't be right. And we're lucky, we're fortunate. All right, we don't have enough houses at the moment, but we're fortunate to at least understand maybe the extent of our problem. But just to sort of have no lists because we can't cope with any other people.
I mean, to put it into context, all of us are fundamentally rationing scarce resources. And of course, we do have some unique features in Daventry District, like local connection housing in the villages. So we do actually house people in the lower bands because actually, when there's a Section 106 criteria on a property, and we've got some of those going back 20 odd years, then somebody with a local connection to that village will get given priority above somebody in a higher council tax, in a higher housing band. So, you know, that's a unique feature of our district that's evolved over many decades, and Northampton don't have any of those. So, you know, it's a bit needs must really. I think it reflects that there's a lot of private rental availability in Northampton that there isn't here as well.
Councillor Rich.
Roughly, what percentage of the people who are in the, you know, the lower categories, the less urgent cases, what percentage of them have been on the waiting list for more than a year?
I don't know that figure. I mean, we can run all sorts of numbers like that, but it's an interesting thing because actually you might start on band D and then your circumstances change and you'll go up to the band. So you know, you'd have to take that into account. So it's sometimes people go on the housing waiting list because they know a development's coming through in their village, and they, even though they're band D, they'll know they'll have a good chance of bidding on a property when it comes through, because a lot of that marketing is done by the housing associations beforehand. So, you know.
But we almost come across a lot of people who merely say that, look, no, I'm not on the waiting list, because, you know, what on earth is the point? And if you go on the waiting list, you just, you know, they pretend that they're going to do something for you, but the harsh reality is that you know, they can't and they won't.
It's the old-fashioned waiting list concept went about 10 years ago. So you went on the list, you knew nothing, so unless you phoned every week and said, where am I on the list for Daventry, Braunston, Brookside, whatever, it was all happening behind the scenes. Now, with choice-based lettings, you can see what's been advertised each week. You express your bid if you're interested in a property, and you can see at the end of the week, or even during the bidding process, where you are relatively on the list. And you know, if it's, and it sets out if it's a local connection property, and if you know you've got a local connection for that particular location, then you know you're going to be in with a chance, because you might show that you're 5th on the list or 10th on the list, but actually if you're the only one bidding that's got the highest level of local connection to that village, then you'll be the one nominated first. So you know, that's would take a lot of analysis actually to get to the bottom of that, but it's, people understand the reality of it.
I was going to write that point that you had is exactly the point I raised, and I almost like to say, like, what sort of question would Councillor Ritchie asked? And that was exactly it. I also said, how many of those people will never ever realistically get an offer made? And the reality is some of them will. And what is the movement of people from band D into a household band C? How many families or individuals applications are successful? So there is a lot of work we can do for interest, but what we could do about it is debatable. And this is where perhaps when we go to unitary, we need to have that more sophisticated.
Can I just have a follow-up question on that? I suppose it's really to you, Richard, rather than Maria. When we do go into unitary, we will have our long lists with the categories. We will have this single register that they have in Northampton town. We're going to need to make sense of it, and clearly what is going to happen, we have got to, you know, we are going to need to concede that the people who are in Northampton are going to have higher priorities for housing than many of the people that are on the old Daventry registers. And I have already heard talk from people in Northampton about how one of the benefits for them will be that they can now get housing, and they can get housing not in Northampton, but in nicer bits of Northamptonshire that they will want to go.
Well, there's some interesting, you talk about section 1...
Section 106.
Yeah, just listen to this was interesting.
I mean, I'm probably going to make a different point, but you have to remind me of the other one.
The point where the affordable housing is tied into...
The affordable housing SPDs, supplementary planning document, guidance, is part of planning policy. And our current policy, and it has been for about 3 years, is that all affordable housing has got a local collection criteria. So there are hundreds of properties in Daventry district that can only be let, that will be given priority to people in that village, or that village and the few surrounding ones, and then the district, and there's a cascade. Northampton Borough have none of those, so that will even up the score. The Southamptons have a few of those, but not as many as us, but they don't even use choice-based letting, it's all done in the background. So untangling all this, I think the likelihood of West Northamptonshire having a housing allocation policy that covers the whole new area on day one is very, very unlikely, because you will probably have to zone it to make sense of all this, because it ties into planning policies as well. But don't forget, big chunks of Daventry district are in Northampton related development areas. So parts of our district even now are already being let to Northampton residents, because they have been built to meet Northampton's needs, both private and social rented.
Councillor Howard.
Can I just clarify that one point there?
Okay.
Is that right? Yeah. So you're absolutely right, but there is actually some sort of protection which may be a hindrance to get some sort of harmonisation of policy through the whole law. So there's a lot of things to untangle, but you raise a good point with regard to where the demand will be.
Our housing policy officers have got quite a lot of thinking to do across West Northamptonshire.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's interesting.
So those figures that you gave us for the individual bands, and you said that they are active applications, is there something in place for people who apply to go onto it and they're now on it, but then they find other means, perhaps like, tax credits, other benefits, which then allow them to go into private? Do they then automatically come off that list?
They'd let us know if they've had a change of circumstances.
And do they do that, or do you find when it comes to it that it's actually like a big...
I mean, just because somebody's privately renting does not necessarily mean that will change their band. They're entitled to be on the housing waiting list as long as they've got a local connection. So any change of circumstances like that, they just need to notify us, and then we will adjust the band accordingly. But I can guarantee if we were in that report 5 times a day, it would look very different, because it's individual applications can come on, go on, come off, become active, become inactivated, be changed.
And do you find that people do notify you? Like you do get a good response of people notifying you, and then
we get to find out eventually. I mean, everyone. I mean, it's in their interest to tell us if they've had a change of circumstances, because it could increase their priority.
Councillor Wesley.
Yeah, I mean, because people have to bid, don't they? So,
Yes, they bid.
I mean, so by active bidding, you sort of know where they are and what the criteria is fixed. And I was just going to sort of say, it was not so much a question, but just a point. Anecdotally, just because people are in Bandy, people do actually suddenly find themselves a house, because they suddenly actually collide with a load of criteria that actually work for them, and also people that are higher up actually don't want to live there for a number.
Or we have or everyone in the highest possible priority is bidding on another house somewhere else.
Yeah,
because we happen to have a few the same in one week.
It does happen that quite a lot of people surprisingly
all
find
bands
themselves in
get,
house.
And you can see from the numbers, at any given time, there's 26 in emergency band. They're not all necessarily going to even be able to go through the housing waiting list, because some of them, the housing associations refuse nominations. But that's, we're covering that later.
Another area of... Okay, so we'll move on. We covered a little bit on housing grants, but I'll just give you the commentary on it. So Housing Options also holds the budget for applicants to remain in their own homes longer by using aids and adaptation. I think that's a bit about this self-sufficiency that we need to encourage with regard to our residents. The Medical Liaison Officer is able to assess and recommend approval for a grant for those in need of aids and adaptations, working with other medical professionals and occupational therapists to establish the best solution for the applicant stroke family, and then pass to the care and repair team to casework and manage the delivery of the works required. So grant funding available here at Daventry. We have some £615,000 available to disabled facilities grant, and 156 which is home repairs assistance grant. You were saying about that they don't always always spend that. There's not always the demand to share that. That was
So disabled facilities grant, the last couple of years we're fully committed. In fact, technically we've gone above because some landlords and owners have to make their own contributions, so we routinely go above that, but the net budget is around that 615. So means tested for adults, but children's grants can be up to 30,000 without any means test. The home, and that's statutory, we don't go beyond the statutory requirement, and it's really an issue, to be honest. You have a small number of cases where they might have an expectation for more works, but that's as much as we can do. And those grants are deemed to change their situation from their house doesn't meet their needs to it does. So you can't do partial works with the grants. You've got to solve the problem. Sometimes it's not reasonable or practical to do a grant, so then we have to work with the client for other housing options, which is why we've got them all together. So you might go from being a grant applicant to being on the housing list, or vice versa. Home repair assistance is discretionary. We've had that. That's survived. That's been around for a long time. It's long been a discretionary grant that these councils wanted to support because it means that owner occupiers, it's means tested, who might be asset rich, but if they're cash poor and they've got a leaky roof, need new windows and need new central heating, and they've got no money to do it because they're retired and what have you, we can provide them with a grant up to 5k plus a top-up loan, interest-free, of a further 5k.
You say that we don't go beyond the statutory provision and that's rarely an issue. Do you think that's because actually the statute's pretty good in that regard?
I mean, the legislation allows you to refuse a grant because it's not reasonable and practical, because you've got to be satisfied, because the grant conditions basically say we're fixing the problem and the grant conditions are going to apply for 10 years. So if you know actually this is only going to do a fraction of the work that's needed, or the rest of this house is in a terrible state and needs modernising and it's not appropriate to spend 30,000 on adaptations in this circumstance because it's not sustainable. So there's the sort of case. Occasionally, clients they just think they've got a £30,000 cheque, but that isn't how it works if you follow the very carefully, it's very prescribed criteria.
Thank you. Okay, just a couple more slides. We touched on this with regard to the choice-based letting process, and then I'll read the commentary and then we can see if there are any further questions. So the aim of the choice-based lettings is to make letting arrangements more transparent and to give a true understanding of the housing available in Daventry District. Once an application to join the Home Choice Register is assessed, it is placed in either one of the bands, either emergency or one of the 4 bands, according to the reasonable preference criteria and the applicant's housing needs. Applicants have a bidding number. They're allowed them to view and express an interest on properties that they are eligible for, up to 3 bids each week. So the emergency band is used only for homeless cases, applicants who are unable to discharge from hospital, and applicants subject to multi-agency review. So available properties will be advertised on a weekly cycle. Details of available properties are advertised on the website at homeandchoicelink.org. So once the cycle is ended, we generate a short list of applicants that are then nominated to the registered providers, who then make the offer of the property for the nominations provided. So we just almost provide the applicants, but it's actually the RP, the Housing Association, that make the final decision. And I'm sure that at times there are some disagreements on that, and I'm sure that Mary will either share one of those experiences with you or detail any more that we can.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, our policy says that you're eligible to be on the housing waiting list as long as you've got any housing debts you've got are £1,000 or less. They're more than, and if you've got housing debts, you've got an agreement to be repaying them, and you can keep it to it for 3 months. You know, if a housing association decide that that's more than they're willing to bear, they won't go for it. If it's somebody that used to be a tenant of theirs and they owe them a few £100, they might not accept that. Or if they actually deem that this tenancy might not be sustainable because if this family ends up on benefits, they won't be able to afford the rent, and they turn them down on that basis. So we do have some interesting struggles because ultimately the property belongs to the housing association, and even though they've signed a service level agreement with us, they don't always abide by it to the letter. And that means there are people out there who it's very difficult to find secure housing.
I suppose we have I'm on the Insight Committee for Futures, which gives us a bit of a lobbying to try to rectify some of these things, but they are their own companies, and this is one of the issues that we have.
So, sorry, Chair, so to be clear, somebody's bidding, putting their 3 bids in a week, they're doing all of the things that they're supposed to do, they're at a level of criteria that allows them to do that, and they're continually going on to the shortlist to be considered by a housing association, being continually rejected.
I wouldn't say they're continually, but we do have cases that might have had a
Because that is possible.
Yeah.
So
because if the decision is made on that
so they
day.
could be in the churn of actually being perhaps the most eligible people, but never ever actually get offered a...
Yeah, and don't forget they could be the highest priority, but if that's a local connection property,
Yeah, I'm just...
the local connection might pick them, and then
But they could be the highest priority with a local connection, but actually we don't want you, so you ain't going on it.
Yeah.
That's the
that does occasionally happen. Yeah.
I don't think we should be always hard on the RPs for this, because it may well be that the individual has a terrible track record of debt, of a lifestyle which is nuisance or antisocial behaviour, and there may be some legitimate reasons why an RP. The fact is they've gone through our criteria and we feel they are eligible is
So what I was going to say, is there a mechanism there to try and shift them out of that cycle? Like, look, you've got to put a payment plan back in place.
Oh no, they were only on the list because there's a payment plan in place. So we've done all our, they meet our criteria. They wouldn't be eligible
so there's nothing else
on the housing
in
waiting
that
list.
situation. There's not much else that this district.
And don't forget, if they're in emergency band, they might have even greater arrears because those rules don't apply the same if you're in emergency
So
band.
what support is there for people who have those serious financial difficulties?
Sometimes providing with the 8 properties that DDC owns, sometimes they might move into there for a few months to give them an opportunity to get their arrears down.
Okay.
Sometimes, they can find charitable contributions to help them. There's a range of different things that might be done, but some applicants, some households are difficult for us to discharge our duties.
So, to be fair, that's exactly the same process that the night shelter do. The night shelter have that process whereby they then engage with people with various skills. It's a multi-agency approach to try to stabilise them so they then can go into... So I think the whole of the Act was all about that. It was about this preventative work, a lot more preventative stuff to stabilise individuals, either that they don't get evicted in the first place, or if they do for some reason, they're then stabilised and be able to go back into an RP. But if people are serial offenders in a particular like debt or antisocial behaviour, they don't then become difficult to house. So these are the complexities of homelessness.
It's a bit more covered in the next slides, actually.
Okay.
The challenges, isn't it?
So Councillor Ritchie, before we move on.
Yes. At least after reorganisation, we'll begin with Northampton Borough, that still has its own housing stock. But I'm concerned that the way that housing was passed by the great majority of local authorities was passed to housing associations, which at the time were local housing associations that were there, that were simply housing associations created within each local authority area to take over that work. But now they're becoming more and more remote. This is not a question, but just really a suggestion to the chair. If it is possible to scrutinise the work and the services of futures, I think that would be interesting. I mean, particularly in some of the estates that are in my ward, there are a huge number of futures properties. a huge number of tenants that have got difficulties with futures, and I have never come across anybody who has had a good word to say about futures. Not one.
But just to reassure you on the lobbying side, I met with the chief executive just before Christmas, and I posed the question. I said, what is the primary function of futures? What is your main goal? And they said it was to build more social or more affordable housing. And I said, well, what about if it was to provide a great quality of service to your tenants? Would that change your model? And the only reason I said that is because people like Bromford, the RP Bromford, are pushing for more neighbourhood officers, more coaching to try and help and support their tenants so they don't end up being evicted, that they do deal with some of the repairs quicker, that there's that more intimate relationship, and whereas futures will go in the other way. And I petition on those specific things, that they have more neighbourhood officers, that they increase their call centre to make it more accessible, and of course the car parking issue, to develop less garage blocks into housing and more into car parking areas. So there is that lobbying going on. I don't know whether we would have any remits to scrutinise them, but all I can reassure you is those fundamental questions are being asked about improving the service and making sure it's tenant focused rather than just about building more affordable. But that's their business model, is to build more affordable housing.
I would just say in response to your question to me, Councillor Ritchie, there is, I believe, nothing to stop us scrutinising the work of a partner organisation. However, our ability to direct them to change their working practices may well be limited, and Tony's nodding at me.
You know, if you wanted to have that, I'm sure the CEO would be interested in, and it would be great for them to get a feel of more than just one lobbying voice about trying to just maybe change their model slightly, but that's a political one, isn't it? Okay. Finally, challenges and opportunities. Well, we'll just briefly go down the list. Stigma. Homelessness can happen to anyone. It's not just about. It's not just about the person sleeping rough. This is sofa surfing. This could be any of us. Any of us could find ourselves in that position. So we need to understand that. Welfare reforms, changes to the benefit system, universal credit. I've had my first universal credit case that I've had that has been somebody incredibly affected by the changes, detrimentally affected, and so these are going to become more and more prevalent. Affordable housing, well, I know Councillor Rich should be aware of sometimes building developers that try to cut down the amount of housing by saying it's not viable. Those are, and I know this district council, because I work with the affordable housing officer, fight tooth and nail to say no, you will provide what you should be providing. So I know that fight is continuing. What else have we got down there? A multi-agency approach. We always talk about partnership approach and how important that is, but I have seen probably since I've been a councillor more and more statutory and voluntary agencies shrinking away from partnership work and just becoming more and more like silos, protecting their budgets, protecting their core functions, rather than understanding that it is about this joint approach that actually solves problems longer term. And somehow we've got to change the culture on that. So that's always going to be a challenge when it comes down to resolving some of the more complicated cases. Temporary accommodation, we've talked about the bed and breakfast, we've talked about the hostel and some of those ideas. They're going to be challenges and opportunities, I think, certainly with the new unitary. Complex cases, there will always be major problems with regard to getting those people into accommodation. We talked a little bit about the RPs having the final say, and some of these people are going to fall. Severe weather protocol, we've got the work with Daventry Methodist Church. We do have very low numbers, Councillor Ritchie, but I do take your point that that may not be accurate, and that may not be the whole picture. But I'm certainly satisfied, and I know that Maria Taylor reassures me that we do as much based on the information intelligence as we can. And we also have a responsibility to report those incidents so that we can in some way provide support and help to people. And then we've got a little bit down about the housing market opportunities with regard to, especially when we come down to joining in with the borough and with South Northants, the different standards in the sector, and multi-agencies, HMOs, whereby there is a short-term housing project going on with regard to that, in trying to get the HMOs signed up to be registered, and obviously the ongoing work with regard to enforcement and ensuring that these places are safe. And then finally, NCCC. Oh yeah, the different councils have are in different situations. DCC and NCC transfer all their social rental housing stock in November 2007, but Northampton have an arm length management organisation that runs theirs. Housing allocation schemes are all different, so we've got to work with regard to the harmonisation of that. Homelessness Codes of Guidance recommends cross-boundary approach, but cooperation between key skills that I've talked about with regard to social services, public health, etc., needs to be improved, and hopefully will be improved with a unitary setting, with everybody pulling from or pushing in the same direction. So those are some of the sort of challenges and opportunities. I think we should not underestimate the difficulties in trying to harmonise something that is operationally effective and efficient in dealing with homelessness. Surely we are a country that is wealthy enough to try to eradicate this problem. Whether we will totally eradicate it, like the government have asked by, is it 2024 or something, or 2022? Because of the complex, I don't know whether that is achievable, but certainly we can come up with some valid, common sense approaches whereby we can get to the most vulnerable and ensure that they have the simplest thing, which is a roof over their head. Maria, is there anything you want to add on any of those?
No, I think we've really overrun.
You've overrun, have we? Yeah.
I think so.
I've told you should never have got me to talk.
I think we're equally culpable on this side of the table. Unless there are any final questions.
No, I'd just like to say thank you.
Absolutely, thank you to both of you for the presentation. It was very illuminating.
And that was with you skimming. My 15 minutes was wholly wrong. I apologise.
You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, or you're welcome to go home and enjoy your evening.
Okay.
Bye.
I might come back in. I'm just going
Crikey, that's a big subject, isn't it?
It is, it's going to be very, very complex moving into the new authorities.
It's massive, isn't it? It's just massive. I don't understand.
Just one of the many areas as well. All that harmonisation is going to take huge.
And just even without that, I mean, it's just the way it all works, and the cost of it, determining who is that homeless person is. I mean, it's virtually impossible.
So very difficult. I think it's like Councillor Organ was saying, you have to have that multi-agency approach, and that extends into the charitable sector, across the different
I just think it's just so easy. It's just be like that one day, and you lose your overtime or whatever, and all of a sudden you're in that, you're over here, and let alone losing your job, or let alone having to change jobs, or whatever. It's just massive. There's no buffers.
Okay, let's continue. Now on to item 5, the rolling work programme. 5A is a verbal update on my voluntary services support assignment. I'll keep it brief. Following on from the feedback and suggestions that I had at the last meeting, I've had discussions with a number of different organisations within the voluntary sector, including Action Community Transport. They're a voluntary organisation that organises transport in rural areas following a lot of the cutbacks to public transport by the County Council. They're looking to expand, and so I'm having discussions. I've previously had communications with them in my role as a County Councillor. They're looking to expand and fill that gap left by the County Council to ensure that the isolation of people in rural areas is limited in that regard. I'm due to have further discussion with Councillor Hills in his portfolio role to follow up on some of the data that I've uncovered. I've also put together what I see as sort of an overview of rural isolation, where voluntary services can play a key role. There are villages such as Everton in my ward that are, Taunton as opposed to extremely isolated. They don't have a public transport link, they don't have a post office. There are people there at serious risk who were not from the voluntary sector. I think I'm now at the point where I'll be able to present the final report to committee next time. That's essentially where things are at. Pivoted slightly to having a more in-depth look at rural needs from the voluntary sector.
Can I just ask on the transport thing?
Yeah.
I know Christine Harris was looking at some sort of, is this the same thing that you're talking about there?
I haven't spoken to Christine Harris on this.
Because I think that was like the overall transport within the district, because that includes Daventry as well, because of course you can be isolated. I know it sounds a bit silly, but if you're old and firm without transport, you can actually, you're still sort of 2 miles from, you can easily be 2 miles from any sort of facility in Daventry.
Previously we had the County Connect on demand service from the County Council, but that was discontinued as part of the cutbacks at county level. So that's created an additional need within the voluntary sector.
I assume that you will come across lots of absolutely excellent voluntary organisations. They're all tackling needs that exist that are not being met by anybody else. There's a question. There was the political choice you've got to make about what you see as the hierarchy of needs in the area, and I just wonder how far we were able to go to actually sort of suggest things like that. Clearly, they're going to be very different in different parts of the district. If you're living in a hamlet that doesn't have a bus service, then yes, your sense of isolation is going to be very great. In other areas, I've been shown statistics, I don't know their legitimacy, I've shown statistics that suggest that the area in the whole of the county that has got the highest level of family breakdown and the highest proportions of children in the protection register is the Headlands. And somehow, we may find that...
So Headlands and Daventry.
Headlands and Daventry rather than Northampton, yeah. And I just feel that we've got to have some sort of sense of how we go ahead with this. You can't go ahead and say, well, in that case, you're only going to fund voluntary organisations that are dealing with family issues in large urban estates. You have got to look for a way that actually recognise the problems exist at all levels. But in terms of where the priorities are, it's it's a problem that is actually bigger than the voluntary organisations. Yet the voluntary organisations exist because they have identified needs and therefore one may reflect the other. But the areas in which strong voluntary organisations emerge are very often from the communities that have got I'm trying to be diplomatic in my choice of words here, but the communities where you have got a larger number of people that have got the capability of forming an organisation and the sort of personal means to do something with it. Now, I just feel we need some way of recognising that and waking up.
I mean, certainly the approach that I've taken so far, because we're looking at voluntary services support, is to look at the existing support that we're providing as a council. I've also tried to look at certain areas where we might be able to extend our support into, but I think ultimately this is one of those issues that is limitless, and so I've tried to keep it reasonably tight.
Yeah, I think one of the things that comes out of being a councillor, and we probably all come across this, is just how valuable this voluntary sector is, and the value that a pound going into the voluntary sector is so valuable because it is voluntary. And I think sometimes, at the moment, with money being tight, it's actually very, very easy. I think we heard earlier about everything perhaps going into silos. Actually, we need to keep the money here. Even at the parish council level, you're being asked for more and more money from more and more organisations. It's almost constant. But the town council, for instance, and at the end of the day, it's a parish council. We go, well, you can't really do that. But you also recognise, £1,000 into a voluntary sector, for instance, like the youth club the hub that's going on at the moment. Suddenly you've got 5 people actually putting their time into that. The payback on that has got to be far greater than the £1,000 that you put in. So you're tempted to put more in. And I think as local authorities or whatever, that we really should be pushing that to those organisations, to those people that are willing to help and willing to do it. That I know the argument goes that people should be paid for doing it, but if that's not the case, I think it's so important that money does get put into those things that are providing such an excellent service across the board. It doesn't say anything, but I'm sure you'll be okay.
I couldn't agree more. Any other comments? Okay, so on to you, Councillor Howington, representing your report into antisocial behaviour. Can we do more, or are we doing that?
So the main areas that I focused on was the service standards, comparing reports with other like councils, and then it's the ease of access that residents have. So I have listed in the report the policy and procedures such as the community trigger and taking action, and as reports of antisocial behaviour varies with complexity and seriousness, it isn't possible to outline timescales. However, DDC and also the other councils do recognise the importance of early intervention, which will limit then how far they will take the procedures. I have brought various reports and other documents with me if anybody wanted to take a look. All policies and procedures seem to be very similar across the ones that we compared them with. However, I did find that DDC was the most active regarding, especially working with their multi-agency, and they did have the largest number of multi-agency partnerships. Comparing them. Officers can offer fixed penalties, and they can lay out offending behaviour measures that required to control it, such as like nuisance. There are forms where DDC can offer mediation to resolve issues, and DDC will work with the police and each party involved in these areas with an acceptable behaviour contracts. GDC also do action days. They have, like I mentioned before, they have the HASBAG. They use a system called eSIMs, which means various, which I have outlined in the report, I think. Talking with residents, it was more, who, what, how, where can I report? It was more, the ease of the access is what they have an issue with. So, I have put into the conclusion that more needs to be done regarding this. Where is it? More needs to be done with making residents aware of how, not to arrange. Where at the moment? I'm looking all over this.
The impact.
More awareness, yes. So it shouldn't have to, so people shouldn't have to pay dishonest people to take their rubbish away, and then it ends up them getting, left with a fine after this. So I have put my recommendations, or my team's recommendations, which are listed 1, 2, 3. Did you want me to read that out?
No, that's fine. Just one question. We've got the graph on page 23 of the papers.
Yeah.
I can't see an explanation of the graph. Hopefully it's fairly self-explanatory. It's recorded incidents in the y-axis.
Yeah.
That surprised me a little bit, because I think people's perception seems to be that society is becoming more antisocial and that these incidents are on the rise, yet within Daventry district we're now only looking at a third of the number of incidents that we had in March 2007.
Yeah.
Has there been a change in definition of antisocial behaviour, a change of reporting methodology? That surprises me greatly that we should have had such a drop, and that's mirrored, the trend is similar, so what's CSP, by the way, on the graph, the maroon line at the top? We've got South Northamptonshire at the bottom, Daventry district in orange, and the top line CSP, Community Safety Partnership.
It's the Community Safety Partnership, which is the combination of the two. So
right.
you have the two together, that's where you get to.
I know that Kevin, he takes praise for the drop, by the way, of it going down. It is. There are other questions that he is also trying to find out with regards to this, such as are people not necessarily reporting their perception of what is antisocial behaviour, because a lot of it will fall under crimes, environmental crimes.
That just to me was a source of surprise, that we should have had a 66% fall in antisocial
I wonder if we can ask for some sort of breakdown for the figures as to why, what this actually means, because it doesn't correspond with anything else. It suggests that over the period that there is an inverse correlation between antisocial behaviour and smoking cannabis. It just doesn't seem real.
This graph is what gets sent to all of us, we get sent them from Kevin on a regular basis. Is that something that you would like me to do? Did you want me to ask?
Please, just as a point of curiosity, I'd just like to know a little more about it. So, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I agree on the graphical representation. Just sort of anecdotally, obviously, I'll come back to the role of Town Council here. The Town Council runs the CCTV in the town, which is not, admittedly, it's not in right across the town, it's primarily town centre and slightly outwards. But, those numbers, I don't think we see, and this is a difficult thing. It's like not everything is reported on CCTV. What we get is reports from the camera operators and the people who do that. They actually put independent reports in what they see in and around the town. And we basically it's a constant level of antisocial behaviour, which is the primary part of the graph, and all the other bits which are genuine, actual criminality mostly. So it does seem a little bit odd, and I think just out and about and talking to people, I think if you said to anybody in this town, let alone the district, what are your views of it? It's just like, well, yeah, the people doing that there, the cannabis smoking, the littering, the dog farming, and everything else. And so I think the recommendations are good because do you report that to the police? Do you report it to a PCSO? Do you report it? Where is it? And I think some of the best things that this council do is when it's the likes of Kevin Fagan that goes, yeah, actually give that to me and I'll give it to the bloke that can actually do something about that. I think that is such a useful thing for people to have in the town. But I'm a little bit unsure about the graph, if I'm honest.
Councillor Ritchie.
I mean, one of the advantages of receiving Councillor Harris' report was that I wasn't aware that you could report it on the DDC website, and these papers came out just on the day that I had somebody writing to me saying that they had a serious case of antisocial behaviour to report, and I could tell them right away what they could do. Just this morning they came back with a long email and a trail of emails that had resulted, and there was sort of message saying, yeah, it was easy to report, but absolutely damn all has happened since then. They have made so many attempts to contact the officers, or so many attempts to contact the police, and they haven't even had an acknowledgement. Well, they had a lot of acknowledgements in a stream of email correspondence from the district council. But I note that there's the suggestion, looking at page 21, that you can also drop in at the offices. They say it's an option that isn't often used. Well, this person said, look, I'll come in and see you and discuss this with you. And the response from the officer was, no, there's no point. So I think that while this report is useful in terms of making it easier to report, we have a lot to do in actually following up what happened to it. The other case that I also had a follow-up email by coincidence just this morning was somebody who's having made a complaint, a complaint in the sense of antisocial behaviour, and has got so exasperated that they now want to know how they can make the complaint against the district council for hardly responding, for at least for not getting back and keeping them informed about what was happening. And I just feel that there is something else that we perhaps need to be thinking about as well.
I mean, the team is quite a small team that deal with it. There's obviously Kevin Fagan, and then there's 2 part-timers. Is that right? There's 2, yeah.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
But yeah, to have an acknowledgement would be, that's what I was led to believe is done, would be that everyone is contacted.
Before I come to you, Councillor Worsley, I would just like to encourage the committee just to discuss and improve upon possibly recommendation 1, which I think as it stands is a little too nebulous. It's more than it is. There's not a specific action point. 2 and 3 give clear recommendations to officers and to strategy group or whoever may be acting upon it. I think we need, if we're to put forward recommendation 1, it needs to be something specific, rather than just saying more.
Yeah.
Councillor Worsley.
That's sort of what I was going to come to really. I think, can we do more is the sort of the thrust of this report, isn't it? And I think we have to be a little bit careful with the things that Councillor Richards just brought up, in as much as, well, yeah, of course, everyone can always do more because you can actually take on other roles. But we do have to remember that some some of these items are antisocial behaviour. Some of these things are actually away from what Daventry District Council does and can do, because in essence they are police matters, they are emergency service type matters, and I think yes, rubbish accumulating in people's gardens. Maria Taylor has powers to actually stop that noise. We have powers to actually stop those sorts of things, those sort of antisocial type behaviour things. Some of the other things are a little bit outside that, and it's a differentiation of those. And I think this is where the recommendations need to come in, and it's actually having the expectations. So it's like, yes, Kevin Fagan can point somebody to the police, and that is a really useful thing to do, but maybe within that, more needs to be done to encourage people to report it. Maybe that is the list of people that you can contact on what they actually do, or contact us here and we will contact them for you. But it's also saying that actually we're not going to be running around following that up, because I think that's unrealistic, as you've actually found out. It's only depending on what that was. There are, for instance, the police will tell you that they actually quite like the Twitter updates and the Facebook updates, because they actually do read them and look at them, and if they see 14 things coming on the same thing, they're much more likely to go and look at that instead of you dialing 999 or whatever. So it's almost like a focus. I think that more needs to be done to encourage people. Maybe we should instigate a focus page as to the methodologies of actually doing that, and how that actually may or may not get resolved, because you can't mix up rubbish in the garden with somebody sort of threatening people and rolling around drunk at the end of the road. Two completely and utterly different things in different contexts.
Just trying to capture the essence of what you're saying, Councillor Wesley. If we were to eliminate the words "more needs to be done" and replace them with, and this is just a suggestion, DDC to undertake a publicity campaign to encourage people to report perpetrators of antisocial behaviour. So throwing that out to the committee. Ideally, when we pass this on to strategy, I would like something in the place of "more needs to be done." To encourage people to report perpetrators of antisocial behaviour is fine. That's a noble aim. But the purpose of this committee should be to put forward a tangible suggestion rather than just highlighting the need for someone else to delve into.
Yeah, I think one sort of, that points to 2 and 3 really, doesn't it? Review the website, because what we're talking about here is we're talking about really the online and the phone and on the phone.
Yeah.
It's almost create a message page, isn't it? Create a portal into that thing, but with a list of expectations of where those things go.
I welcome your attempt at trying to improve it, Chair, but I'm not sure if it answers the questions anymore. What would a campaign look like? And I think with regards to that, there are things that we need to be able to say that we do. Even when it's on to the second point, the use of mobile phones and mobile apps. I don't know. My guess would be that an awful lot of the people who feel most threatened by antisocial behaviour are people who are of a generation and bit of society where that's not how they communicate. I think that there is also, there's a certain reluctance, a rational fear of reporting antisocial behaviour. Because, if they know they reported it, they might meet you in the street the next day. And you can't discount that. And therefore, I think it is getting across Stu, which didn't seem to come across as strongly on the website, as I thought a point. The fact that there are safe procedures for doing this, that this is a totally confidential thing. I mean, there are some cases where, if something is reported, it is perfectly clear who has reported it. There's a particular car park near Newbold Quarry that I have never put my car in for a while, because the guys who were flying tipping there must know that I would be the only one who would have reported them, because I was sitting in my car till we saw it through. But these things do come up.
Or a neighbour, it's a neighbour.
Or if it's a neighbour, yes,
That's
exactly.
obvious.
Yeah.
I think there's validity to the concerns, but I don't think those concerns should necessarily dissuade us from encouraging people to report antisocial behaviour where safe and appropriate. I mean, Councillor Howard, do you have any thoughts about specifics that we could include in recommendation 1?
I mean, they do go out and do like an action day. So when it's like I say, when there's community days going on, like the litter pick on the South Brook, then they'll have, the police will be there and various partners will be there, which will then promote how to do this. So maybe it's
DDC to engage directly with the community,
and perhaps put in the options of how to report this just discreetly. Then because the Daventry calling goes to everybody's house, and maybe a bit more with social media. You're saying I don't know if people are feeling reluctant to report. I mean, the app is the app that I assume a lot of people have got, the app, because that's how I remember what Binda put out each week. That was all it is. It's like that's what the app looks like, and I was just thinking of an extra button of some sort to report.
I think that's recommendation 2, isn't it?
Yeah, the self-service.
Self-recommendation.
But to channel it down, I mean, that's why we're here now, because I couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do have to be a little bit careful about even in 2019. It's like, for instance, I don't run apps on my phone, very rarely use them. I just don't, and I think it's very, very easy to think that everyone's walking around checking their phone all the time when there's lots and lots of people that aren't.
There's lots that aren't and lots that are.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
exactly. I'm just saying, but it's not that's not the catch-all. It's just like you have to think about the traditional as well. The app is a good idea. I think Daventry District Council has got some good stuff going on, and there's some various good things going on with the police. What people don't know is where to go and how to do it, and I think it is really, really that simple. So
it's an education.
I think I know I've just sort of said about web pages, but it's actually almost like a how-to information page, how to, when to, and what to expect. And I think
the other councils do that very well.
So it's what can I report there? Well, actually, you can report anything if you like, but you've got to understand that that's not what the district council do, and that goes through to another agency. But what the council do is the waste in the front garden and the noise emanating from the back garden. It's like a little pathway. Now, if you've got that on the website, you can also put that in paper terms, and you can also leaflet it if you need to do so, or point people to those directions if they're unsure, because you can't just make it. People have got to find information from somewhere, so where is it?
So like a campaign, do a bit of a launch campaign thing, would that be?
Yeah, even not the campaign. It's just, I mean, my personal view is I always think that our website is a little bit difficult to use if you want.
I stated that.
If you want to report, for instance, if you want to report rubbish thrown out or any sort of broken bins, it's a little bit convoluted to without, there's not a button to go to, where do you find it, how do you do it, then you've got to put in, you've got to say whether you're a resident, you've got to say what the postcode is, and then it gives you a map as to where you've got to try and pinpoint it. It's quite difficult to describe where somewhere is that's not a road, for instance. You know, how do you say that somebody's misbehaving on a pathway that's round the corner between two estates or blocks of houses? That sort of thing is quite difficult. So, you know, and I think that's where we can step in really, because we can't be the catch-all for all of this behaviour. So, how can we do better? We can direct people better to the right place to get what we do. Almost like a split page of what DDC does and what other people do.
So, having another stab at wording recommendation 1, maybe DDC to encourage people to report perpetrators of antisocial behaviour and improve methods of signposting.
With a where to go, signposting, communication. Web page also useful as, you know, which should be recreated as a hard copy of the
Does that not fall under?
Yeah, well, I said they sort of fall under that.
Yeah.
I think, Chairman, sorry, if I can just offer.
I can see Tony's away.
Well, I think what I see as the differences between the 3 recommendations. One is about promoting, making awareness, you know, so to encourage people to report, and 2 and 3 about how they might make those reports. Yeah. So 1 is about promotion, awareness, something like that. And I'm not sure you need to prescribe how that is done, because we have communications professionals who will be able to come up with some suggestions about that, and no doubt that would form a response when the report went into strategy group.
Okay. So if we go
to promote.
Yeah, DDC to encourage people to report perpetrators of antisocial behaviour and provide appropriate signposting.
Agreed.
Okay. And are we all agreed on the other 2 recommendations? Or do they require further discussion?
I think that sort of does it what we just said, really, doesn't it?
I appreciate, you know, that there's people that don't use the app, but at the moment there is no option on the app for people that do use it, so that's why that's more targeted.
Yeah, I mean, I would sort of, I just wonder whether the Harbour District bit should be in there. Maybe that's or if you see what I mean. But okay.
Yeah, maybe. I'll take that bit out.
Up to you if it's your recommendation. I don't think there's any harm in providing a comparison.
No, it's fine. I would say not that.
Again, just to have my view, I think that gives us a reference point. So there's no harm in that at all.
Catherine, do you need the rewording of option recommendation 1 again?
Yes. Yeah,
that's fine. Fantastic. Okay, so all agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, then moving on. Item 6, implementation activity. Update
Do you want
on.
me to just give you a little update on Ian's?
If you have it, yes.
Well, it's only it was a quick email exchange, and we'd just like to say that he's underway with it, organising officer interviews from the list that he actually gave. He's asked me to contact parish councils with some sort of questions to see how they are seeing the new waste collection. He asked me to do that with interviews. I'm sort of thinking, he asked me to sort of randomly select parish councils and not all of them. And I was just sort of thinking about that last night, and I was thinking maybe a quick survey, like a survey monkey type thing, out to all of the parishes, 5 or 6 questions, fairly simple, that could easily be collated off the website. I was thinking that might be a better way of doing it. I don't know I did ask him to get that, but I haven't had a chance to see any response on that. But I was wondering what the committee thought that would be a better
I
idea.
think that makes life a lot easier than multiple paper copies, and parish councils write their clerks, so pretty adept at technology these
Yeah,
days.
well, I was thinking even if, okay, it's a survey, so, if we get 10, 20, that's as many as we're going to interview anyway, and it's like, what are we going to ask them? It's going to be, what do you think of it? I can imagine going along to some parish councils and being there for 4 hours listening to Mrs. Smith had a horrible problem with a smelly bin for 2 weeks, and etc. etc. So I was thinking that's perhaps a better idea. The only thing that I need, that I was thinking, obviously within the organisation we've got a list of like a global to all parish clerks, I would imagine. How do I implement that and how do I do that? Was the question.
I think if you make contact with Catherine, we can help arrange the survey and make sure it goes to the right people and
So if I just come up with a little series of questions and things like that, and I was thinking, do we use
We currently use SurveyMonkey, but there might be a GDPR issue with it. Depends on what the questions we're asking.
Okay.
But we can advise on that if you can.
I'm saying, I was just thinking really, really generic questions. It's like, have you had any complaints? How many complaints? And a general view on where it was. So really, really simple. So if I do that, then is that okay? So copying in on that. Is that all right?
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now on to the implementation.
Yeah, I think, Chairman, just before going to the implementation, I think just as the issues have arisen, just to remind members that Catherine is able to support members in their task panel work. She's not to do the work for you, but she's there to support the work. And so if any queries about timing's presentation, then please use contact Catherine. Right, implementation activity. So we've got the usual charts starting on page 25, which is the assignment 17 of the commercial property action plan. And we're now showing this as completed. I think if you recall at the last meeting, there were a number of ongoing actions and was suggesting that we need to get to a position where we actually draw a line under these, which doesn't necessarily mean there isn't still things carrying on, but I think we're saying it's largely delivered, and therefore we can use this as a date to then start the clock for a post-implementation review. So in particular, recommendations 2 and 3 are now shown as completed, and they were shown as amber on the last version. Yep. And then moving on to assignment 19, we still have one outstanding action there, action 5, which is targeted for 2020, so that will sit with us like that for some time to come. Assignment 20, again one outstanding action on that one, which is action 4, and again that work is targeted for December this year, so again until that's completed we won't be reporting the completion of that plan. Then on to assignment 21. Right, I've not this one, have I?
Yes, 21.
Yeah, come to 21. So we are, we've still got 2 actions, the first 2, action 1 and 2, which are not yet due, so still showing as amber. Action 5, we are showing that as complete now, that was shown as amber last time round. So that's the progress, Jim.
And just one question, will the Chief Echo report go to strategy next week?
Yes, that's on the agenda for strategy.
I haven't had the app yet.
I don't think it's out actually. Tomorrow, I think.
Tomorrow. Can I bear in mind items on assignment 21, August 2019? Is that sort of a reasonable, will that be undertaken by then, do you think, when we've got August and November for those two items? And it would seem that from the presentation, I'm not sure that that is actually on the agenda.
The dates there were set by the executive director community, so I'm not in a position to say that they won't. She must have believed they were deliverable at the time, but we can ask the question of her.
I just got the impression from today's presentation that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I think we need to understand the detail behind the recommendation, which is not clear to me at the moment, but we can go back and check on that.
Yeah, that would be good, thank you.
Okay, and that takes us on to item 7, the one-year post-implementation activity reviews. There are none to report at this stage. Missed that off the agenda. It's normally coming on the agenda.
Thank you. And okay, so final decision is portfolio holder attendance at S&I next time around. Who haven't we seen? Who we would like to see? Councillor Morgan, Councillor Alder recently, Councillor Guildford's done a couple of appearances in recent past, so Councillor Miller's attended, and in fairness, I think when we've invited Councillor Miller along, it's tended to be to talk about unitary, but we now have specific meetings regarding local government reform, which I think members can use to scrutinise his work and the work of the rest of us on the WNJC. Would Councillor James be appropriate given ongoing events within his portfolio regarding town centre vision and?
I tend to be saying that, what are the actual issues? And it does strike me that the biggest headache that the council has at the moment is sanctifying and running out of time. And is anything actually going to happen there? Can DTC do just a little bit of what for many, many years Henry Boot found it couldn't do? What is realistic there? I think there'll be other things that come up around planning issues about, will we actually see houses being built in the, what was the Churchfield site, the northeast area? Given that there have been all sorts of delays that have come up, I just feel that
northeast city.
Yeah, Daventry.
I just feel that a lot of things there that the questions come up about what how is the council responding to them, because they must be some of the biggest decisions that the council needs to take at the moment, and yet we hear nothing about them.
Any preferences over and above Councillor James? Were we happy for
I was
the
going to
invitation you sent to him?
about Councillor James.
So we agree then? Yeah. Thank you. I shall email him asking to attend. So just to confirm, we want to hear more about Site 5 and housing on the North East Sustainable Urban Extension.
Those stories are running the boy.
Okay, there is no urgent business, so that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Scrutiny and improvement, urgent business.